Hello and welcome to this week's IG Live. It is our first IG Live of 2026, so thank you for joining us. And I'm excited to kick it off by talking to Veeda Bybee, who I have a stack of her books in my lap right now. Hello. We are going to be focusing on the Invincible list of Lani Lee, but she has a number of other books that you would enjoy reading. Hold on. Shining the Light, celebrating 40 Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders who changed the world. So she has so many different kinds of books. Like I said, we're going to be talking about fiction. We've got nonfiction. She has a cookbook. Hello. And This Girl Survived, several in that series. And I just got this. I know you have one in The Beast Beneath Their Wing. It's so exciting because you have so many different kinds of books. Of course, we're going to be focusing on one today, but the Invincible list of Lani Lee. But it's exciting that you do so many different kinds of stories and, as I said, nonfiction, a cookbook. It's so fun to talk with you.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm excited to talk with you about all the things or whatever you would like. So yeah.
Well, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself? I think probably a lot of people already know who you are, but for those that don't, and how did you get started in writing? What was that journey like for you?
Thank you. That is such a good question. I just read this really great article about Dave Pilkey, who is the creator of Dogman in the New York Times. And in his write-up, he talks about how it took him many tries to become what he is today. And I feel like that is very much my journey as well. I started out writing in journalism. So I'm a former journalist, and I studied journalism in college. And just throughout trying different things, I've always loved writing, but I didn't quite know my path. And so it led me to children's books. And that's what ultimately, I guess, stuck. But I just love how, we have life experiences and we don't really know where they're going to take us. So even though I majored in journalism and I'm primarily writing for children, I definitely use my training and my studies in journalism for my work now. Like you mentioned, I have a nonfiction book, and I really am so grateful for that background as I was writing Shining a Light, which is about 40 Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders who changed the world. And so that was like, I had just such a great experience writing that book. And then with the fiction that I do now too, it draws upon just my life experiences. And so I just think like for anyone who wants to be a writer or anything creative, just trust in the process, like that article I read today with Dave Pilkey. He traditionally published 5 picture books before, he is what he is now today. I'm not saying we all need to be at that level, but just like even professionals, we don't quite hit our stride or find out where we're going to be till maybe much later. Maybe that's still my journey too.
All right. I love that because I think sometimes from the outside, people just assume you always knew what you wanted to do and had this really focused vision. So that's nice to hear that maybe, the path may not be completely straight to get where you want to go.
Yeah, and you mentioned I even have a cookbook out, and for a few years, I did. I had a food blog, and I invested a lot of my time in writing into recipes, and that didn't really go anywhere I thought at the time. But then 10 years later, I have a cookbook. So yeah, we really don't know our journey in it. So it's quite amazing to see what can happen as we keep going.
Well, and one of the things I noticed is that a lot of your books are focused kind of on the what people call the middle grade age range. What do you love about writing for that group?
It is a magical time, so middle grade in publishing, it's referred to like 8 to 12 years old. And I think those are just some really formative years. And I don't think like, if you don't like reading at that time, it doesn't mean that you're not going to become a reader, like you still have chances, but those years, they really just capture so much like imagination, and it's just like the self-discovery time. And I think I discovered a lot of myself during that time. So partly I'm writing for Veeda during those years too. I discovered so many books. I didn't start off as a reader, so when I discovered books that I really loved, like Beverly clearly was my favorite author growing up. But
So I was just going to ask, like, so what were the books that turned it around for you?
Yeah, it was a summer library challenge, where sometimes public libraries will have like a summer reading challenge. You have to read a certain amount of books. So when I was in elementary school, I did not like to read at all. I just felt like books were, they just didn't, there was nothing really attractive to me. But my mom made me do the summer reading program, and I did it. And I picked this book because I think it was one of the suggested titles. It was one of the Ramona books,
Oh
maybe
yeah.
Ramona age 8. And
Hmm.
when I was at the library, there was an older girl there. She was in second grade, and I thought she was like this cool kid at school. And she loved the book. She was like, "Oh, that's a really good book. You're gonna like it." So I went into it really positive, and I
Mm.
did love it. Like I love this character Ramona, who was so spunky and feisty, and she was like opposite of what I was. And so I think like that age range, or the 8 to 12, like we're discovering what do we want to be, or what are we attracted to. And I was so shy, and I wanted to be, I guess, someone who was outgoing and who just could speak her mind. And so I really love those Ramona books. So reading about her stories as I became a reader was just a really part of my process.
I love that. And also you've got a character now, an Invincible list of Lani Lee. A lot of it is about finding courage, finding your own strength. So tell us about the book and what was your inspiration behind it. And again, just so people can see.
Thank you, and thank you for showing the
Yeah.
cover. Yeah, so
Yeah.
it's about a girl named Lani, and if you see the cover, she has a saxophone, and so she is a musician, and she's going on this band trip to England. She plays in this like after school elite band, and so she's really excited. But her little brother Gavin is coming along with her, or at least he was, and so that kind of threw her. And he goes through something where he can't go, so she decides that not only is she going to perform in this concert, but she is going to enter this cheese rolling race in England to give her brother courage back home.
Mm.
But I think a lot of times we can want to be brave. We can want to say like, oh, I'm going to do this, or I have this, aspiration to do something, but we need the tools to do that. We need inspiration. So she
Mm.
draws inspiration from a Chinese folktale she had growing up about the 8 invincible brothers, and she decides to take on each one of their superhero powers to her own, and that helps her to be brave. And I think that's what we need in life. Like I want to say things like, oh, I want to, it's New Year's, and I think I want to do these things to take care of my body, or whatever. But I need to also have tools and a plan. So I hope like that this mythology can show that, you can do these and find inspirations from stories and other sources too.
I love that. And that was something I was wondering about because I think, in today's world of social media, where kids, in some ways, like, they're kind of bombarded by all this kind of sophisticated, well, kind of unsophisticated, but technologically sophisticated, entertainment, that people would think that folk tales and fables really aren't relevant anymore. Why do you think this they're still so important?
Oh, it's interesting. So in Shining a Light, I do school visits, and one of the people I wrote about is Tyrus Wong, and he worked on Bambi in the Disney productions, and he was a really key artist, and not just the movie Bambi, but helping Disney become the style it is now. And I talked to kids about Bambi, and a lot of them have no idea that they've just never seen Bambi. And I'm
Oh,
like, oh my goodness, that was like a big deal growing up. And
yeah.
so stories do they do fade, because and so it's really nice to know that we can share these stories that have meant to us in other ways, and retell them, rewrite them, because those things that we grew up with, like I grew up with Bambi and the kindness
Mhm.
um, and these folk tales I had growing up, kids don't really have it this time and age too, and so we can continue to share that and have some of those like themes of bravery and strength, or like sibling help that can they were applicable for us then, and they are applicable for kids today. I just to say we're like hundreds of years ago is when they were first being told.
Right. Well, speaking of that, because you mentioned this, that story that you chose, in some ways, the not the story itself, but kind of how maybe we were first exposed to it. As kids growing up in the '80s, the book that was kind of what was available to us, in a lot of ways, was kind of problematic. Just American depiction of Chinese folktale. Why was it important to you to kind of take that and kind of reclaim that folktale?
Thank you. I love that question, and I think about that. I think, um, how can I, how can I contribute to this tale that was, originally from China, and all these different people. And I love the fact I took it and I focused really on the siblings and that strength, but also just how they help save their village, which is not the same as the one I grew up. And I think the original book was much older than the '80s, but it was popular in the '80s.
Right, right.
And I think like it helps me recapture that, but I still like really, that book was meaningful to me, and it still is in many ways, but I can make it my own and add it on. Hopefully, share with kids too. Just some of the things that stood out to me more than the things that were maybe not represented as good as they could. But like that sibling strength, and so in this retelling, I add eight brothers in, which is another retelling of the brothers, and in the one in before I grew up, it was only five. And
Right.
eighth brother is just one of my favorites. His superpower is the power of crying, which is about empathy and having sympathy for others and feeling. And I think that's such an important gift for us in this time too. Where we can have a chance to think about others. It's not just like our strength that gives us
Right.
courage, but it's also our ability to connect with other people and to feel for them. And so, like, yeah, so putting his story into the Invincible Lani was really special for me.
What, and is that something you came up with, or was that a different version that you had read? Where
No,
did
that's
where did the eighth brother come from?
yeah. So that is in like a different version. So in the back of the
Mhm.
book, I have my copy here too. So
Mhm.
there's like an author's note, and I talk about the many different versions. And so I believe, let me see if I can flip to it, but it's like from, well, I don't even know where it is now. Okay, so I use it from like one of the Zong people, and so like there's
Mhm.
different variations from the different
Right.
like, Chinese cultures, and so that was one from them.
Because that is, like you said, that's something that you would never expect to run across as a superpower. But I love that you include, because like you said, I mean, I think that that is something that people need so much right now, is that empathy and that connection.
Yeah, and it's been fun when I go on school visits. I'm talking about the book.
Mhm.
It's really fun because I had in my mind the brothers were very much styled like a K-pop band, and so when I was talking with the illustrator, I was sharing with him like this is what I envisioned like these, and right now at the time K-pop Demon Hunters is huge, so the kids
Right.
they're aware, they understand like each of these members of the band have their own ability. Like one is really good at rapping, the other is a
Mhm.
good, like, he sings really high. And we all bring our gifts and talents into this collective group, and so the brothers do the same thing. And so they help each other out and they share off each other. And I think that is it's a very applicable, analogy at the time right now too.
Yeah, I love that, and I think it's so important, like you said. I mean, at this age to talk about sibling relationships, kind of like how do you fit into your family? Because I think that's something you see with Lani. I mean, one of eight kids. I was only one of four, but I could still like relate to the idea of kind of getting lost and wondering like what your role was within the family. And so how do kids, I know you do a lot of school visits, how do they respond to that kind of message or to that idea of, like you said, siblings being like a K-pop band or
Yeah,
like the Invincible Brothers?
no, that's so fun. One of the questions they'll ask, like, where do you fall in your family? Like, are you the oldest? And I'm one of four kids as well. And
Okay.
where do you fall in your family?
I'm the youngest.
You're the youngest. Okay,
Yeah.
yeah.
So
And
there was something, Gavin says something about like, oh, by the time I grew up, everybody doesn't care about family traditions anymore. And I was like, oh, I really felt that because I feel like that happens in a lot of families. I could totally identify with that.
yeah, so
Mm,
I'm the oldest, and my husband is the youngest, and it's so interesting
mm,
to see, our roles, and he has, he's yeah. By the time his siblings are out, his parents are like, Christmas is just different than it was when all
right.
four were home. Like it's
Yeah.
not bad, but it's just like he
Different.
yearns for those times, and I'm the oldest, and I always felt like this like oldest responsibility, and so I think and whether or not we have huge families or not, that could even be in our relationships with other people, like our friends
Mhm.
too. So, but wherever we fall, it's like not good or bad. It's just where we are, and we can definitely strengthen each other from that. So eighth brother is the youngest, and he grows up thinking, "Oh, my power is the worst." But I don't want to give anything away, but it's actually such a strong superpower. And so when Lonnie is taking on each of these different traits, um, that's just as important as there's one brother who can fly, which is really
Right.
fantastic. But that superpower is just as important as the youngest brothers too.
And I love how she uses all of this and kind of like you said, like she uses it to kind of find her own strength. So what do you want kids when they read this book and they see her going on this journey? What do you want them to take away from it, kind of for their own lives?
Yeah, well, one thing, when I'm talking to them about the siblings, like, where do you fall? And some of them are like, oh, I'm like this brother. I can be like that. So I hope that whether it's in one of the brothers or Lani or Gavin or another character, that they can see a little bit of themselves in the book, but also what they want to be. Like I
Mm-hmm.
was not like Ramona Quimbley, but I wanted to be a little like her. And when we read, we can have those really good role models, and some people might think Ramona Quimbley was a good role model, and she was for me, just to have someone who was this kid who felt real kid things, and I just felt seen in some ways. And so hopefully when kids read books, and especially this book here too, they can not just have a sense of adventure, a physical adventure like going to England, or going along with this mythology, but they can also have just confidence and courage like Lani did, because she's, really shy, and she's able to accomplish something physically impressive, but also emotionally impressive too.
Well, and I have to talk about what is it called? The Cooper's Hill cheese rolling
Yes.
race. Because I just love, I mean, I don't think I ever would have expected something like that to be incorporated into like a middle grade novel. It was so great to have it in there, but what was it about that race that made you think, okay, this has to be a part of this book?
Yeah, so
Maybe first, I don't know if everybody, maybe you could explain a little bit about what it is.
definitely. So there is this race in England in the countryside, and it's been going on for over 200 years, where the locals, they'll take a wheel of cheese, and they used to use like a real wheel of cheese, which was 7 pounds, but now they will use like a foam replica, because it's dangerous when they roll it down the hill. But they'll roll it down the hill, and then people will run after it. And the first person who reaches the bottom of the hill wins the cheese and the title. And this is a real race, and I remember hearing about it like years ago. And so we spent, my family and I, when I had really young kids, my husband had an opportunity to have this internship in London, and so we were there, and I was thinking like, oh, this is going to be so cool. We're going to live overseas. I grew up in the military. I remember, hearing my mom taking, my siblings and I over across the seas to Germany by herself, and so I thought it was going to be this really empowering, fun trip. And it was really actually very hard, because I had 2 small children, and I was very lonely, because I was in a new country, even though I spoke English and I can understand everything, was still really difficult for me. So when I heard that we were, in the country of this cheese rolling race, I thought, I want to go do this and see this. But it's not like it's a big tourist attraction. So I had to look up the routes of like how to get there on the bus, the train, booking the B&Bs, and that actually it changed my life. Like I was a really young mom, and I felt all this courage, and so like and the thing with the race, anybody can roll down the hill for the race, or run down the hill. So it's open to anybody. I did not, and I have not, run down the Cooper's Hill for the cheese, but just the journey alone, because when you're walking up to the bottom of the hill, you're still walking up this hill, so it's quite challenging. And that was really a special moment for me, and so I wanted to take that feeling and somehow make it into a book, and so I'm just so glad I got a chance to do that too.
Yeah, that's amazing. And also I mean to have the event itself in it, but also I know I read about your experience, as you mentioned, about be living in another country and with your own young children, and how do you think this book would have been different if it had not been set in England? If she hadn't been on this trip, because I think kind of like you mentioned, that there's something about living in a new place, especially in a different country, that really does make you draw on that inner strength and have the courage, because even if the language is the same, like you're so kind of out of your element. So why was it important to have this be kind of an international journey for her?
Yeah, I'm actually working on a young adult novel that's similar in the ways where they're kind of a fish out of water. And there is just something about not being in your normal environment that really pushes you. And so when kids or teens, when we can do that, we kind of discover what we have, like what we're made out of. And we are made of a lot of things. So sometimes when we're just in our regular space, it can be hard for us to not just fit this role. So like being in a new situation, a new place, it's like a time of like saying, hey, who can I really be? And like where I don't have just the normal pressures or surroundings of like, who I'm at school. So like I think going on an adventure is a really great growth opportunity.
Right. I do want to talk a little bit about, well, if we have time to talk about some of the other books, like you mentioned, YA, like how that experience is different. But first, I was wondering, I know you had mentioned that this was a story that that it kind of sat with you for a long time, that had kind of been with you over the years. What was it about this story in particular that you think kind of stayed with you so much? The story of Lani.
Um,
Lana, sorry.
yeah,
Lani. No, yeah, okay.
yeah, it was it was one of the first books that I read or that I wrote. So it took me many years and many forms of the story to develop it for what it is right now. And I'm really proud of it, and when I first started it, like I think it was like 12 years ago, it was very different. Some of the things are very similar still. And I think like that's okay with writing, like there's some books that happen really fast, and I think the more experience you have, you can do that. But this one, it was not what like 12 years ago, I didn't have the same kind of chops of writing that I do
Right,
now,
right.
um, and so some projects they'll never like see the light of day because they were just like your earlier work, but some they might be able to get a time to, you know, to come out again. And I think like, that's the great thing, like for storytellers, there are opportunities to always tell stories. And like, that's one thing I'm just so grateful for. Like, I know that I can, like, I want to continue to do this. And I love this chance to create and share art with others. And I hope that kids especially too, they can see that they are more than just one story in their life, or they have more than just one thing that they're good at too. We can be so many things, and just like paying attention to the things that you're attracted to. Like I'm not I had no idea when I was young that I was going to be a writer, like an author. Although I love reading, but it just didn't occur to me. But I think, and that's okay because maybe I didn't need that pressure back then. But I'm glad, many years later, I've been able to fall into this, not fall into it, but I work really hard at it too. And so, yeah, and I think like, especially now we can write so many different things too. We don't just have to be a picture book author or just writing about middle grade fantasy. There's like the world is open to us, and I think we live in a really neat time for books that we can share those. Yeah.
Well, and I wanted to ask about that because, like I had mentioned before, you've done a lot of different kinds of things. You've written fiction and nonfiction, and you've also written, hold on, like you're part of several different anthologies. So I was specifically wondering about that. What is it like to kind of be a part of like a collaborative process like that? Or how much, I don't know how much interaction you have with the other authors, or if it's more like interaction with the editor, or how does that come about?
Yeah, it's so I've been a part of 3 anthologies now, and that's been really amazing. I don't really interact with the other authors per se, like we've been on email chains, but it's definitely the authors who are editing the book and the editor. And that I just feel but it's so fun to be part of those collections and to be alongside some of writers that I just deeply admire. And I love the chance that we get to play with short stories. So hopefully, kids or other authors too, you can come up with short stories, and that can really help just generate ideas and kind of play a little. And so like for Beast Beneath the Wind, that was my first time writing like a fantasy based sort. So I wrote about a Lao creature and some kids from Vegas. And I love fantasy, but I haven't had a chance really to write that yet. So it was fun to kind of dip it in and be like, okay, I can do that, so.
Was it hard, since you're used to writing full length novels, was it hard to kind of confine yourself to a short story, or was that did it feel freeing, or what did you think?
So for me, because I have this background in journalism, I do
Mm,
much like writing short is actually way more comfortable than writing long.
mm,
So if you ask, short stories, I can definitely write something shorter, but it's just the challenge for me is like imagining, a novel that's 30,000 words or more. That can feel daunting. But I
right.
have to like not trick myself, but just say, break it up into small chunks, and then it's more doable.
Well, tell us, we just have a few minutes left. About upcoming projects. We've been focusing on this one novel that's come out, but I'm sure you have other things in the works.
Yeah, so I'm a co-writer for a series called Team Awkward, and Joe McCullough and we I just finished book 4 in the fall, so I'll be getting edits back for that. Yeah, and that's book 1.
Yes.
So and they're both slated to come out this year. So book 4 is what I've been working on, and I think I get my edits back next week. So I'll be in edits for that. I'm drafting a young adult book right now as well. I don't think I can announce it yet, but I'm really excited for that. I mentioned it is a fish out of water story, and that one's been that one's been really fun to go back to and to work on as well. And I just have all these different ideas, and I think that's the fun part about it. You know, like I just think like, well, what if we could do this or do that? And I'm so inspired by other creators too. So I love listening, like, you know, to some of the different interviews, like, you know, you've had for picture book authors or just others, and just thinking like, you know, their journeys, and I'm just inspired by others who are trying to share, you know, their voice in the world too.
Now that you've had experience writing YA, do you think you'll do more of that? Do you think you'll still kind of tend more towards middle grade, or what do you, or you're just having fun kind of trying everything out?
You know, I have no idea. My youngest, she's 12, and
Mm.
so she, you know, she's a voracious reader. She was like me when I was younger, and so it's been really fun to pick books out for her and help her, you know, generate this love of reading, because she's very particular, you know, too. Like she doesn't like some kind, and so
Does she
things
like
about
yours?
she does like mine, but not my younger ones, you know, because she's really into um she really loves just like contemporary books too, but
Mm.
also like things with some romantic elements, which is pretty cute, you know.
Right.
And so I think like, you know, what are books that when I was her age that I want to read and gravitate towards. So right now I'm kind of in that mindset, but I'm also like, I also think you know, short stories, picture books,
Mm.
because they're very different. They're also a nice break too. And so
Mm.
I like working on multiple things at the same time, because it gives me like, if I, because I can get bogged down. So like, oh, this is too much. Then I'll go, okay, this is a refresher, and I'll work on that
Right.
for a bit too. Yeah.
Right. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us. It was so fun to talk with you. Like I said, I've been enjoying kind of dipping into all of your different books, and it's really fun to get to talk to you about it.
Oh, I loved it. Thank you for so much for having me.
And for anybody, if you joined us late, as always, this is going to be up on Instagram in a few minutes, and then it will be up on our YouTube channel, so you can watch the whole thing if you'd rather watch it there. So thanks all to all of you for watching, and thank you so much for talking with us.
Thank you.
Bye,
Bye.
everybody.